The footage begins with a calm, open stretch of ocean sunlight glinting off gentle swells, but the voiceover cuts in with a note of tension. It happened off the Horn of Africa, one of the most dangerous maritime corridors in the world. The USNS supply ship John Lenthal was on a routine resupply mission, carrying thousands of tons of food, fuel, and equipment to support deployed US Navy vessels. Her crew knew this was hostile water, but no one expected what was about to unfold. The first sign came from the lookout on the bridge wing, faint dots on the horizon, barely visible against the haze. At first, they looked like harmless fishing skiffs, but as the dots grew larger, binoculars confirmed the truth. There weren't 2 or 3 of them, there were 31 pirate boats. They were moving fast, spread wide in a loose attack formation, their outboard motors screaming over the water. Some had tall ladders strapped to the decks. Others carried mounted heavy machine guns. The John Lenthal's captain called it in, immediately radioing a distress report to the nearest US Navy patrol elements. But help was miles away. Out here, they were alone. Inside the ship's combat information center, the crew activated their anti-piracy protocol. Fire hoses and long-range acoustic devices LRADs were armed. Barbed wire along the ship's rails was checked. Every non-essential crew member was ordered inside, hatches sealed. By now, the pirate swarm had closed to within 2 nautical miles. Over the radio, a garbled voice crackled English mixed with another language. It wasn't a request to stop. It was a demand. The captain didn't answer. Instead, the John Lenthal angled her bow into the swell, increasing speed to throw it all awake. The pirates didn't hesitate. They fanned out, their formation tightening like a noose. And then the first shots rang out, short bursts of gunfire from one of the lead skiffs. The rounds sparked harmlessly off the ship's steel hull, but the message was clear. The John Lenthal's LRAD operator swung the acoustic cannon toward the nearest boats and fired. A piercing, high-decibel beam of sound lashed out across the water. The pirate boat veered sharply away, crew clutching their ears, but another took its place instantly. Minutes felt like hours. The swarm circled, probing for a weak point, looking for a way to close the gap and throw grappling hooks over the side. The ship's defensive team responded with water cannons, sending powerful jets of seawater blasting into the attackers. Still, the pirates pressed closer. And then, in the distance, dark shapes appeared on the horizon. The pirates saw them too. This time, they slowed. The shapes grew larger, faster. They weren't merchant ships, they were armed. It was the USS Bainbridge, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, sprinting at flank speed toward the fight. But before the destroyer could reach effective range, the pirates made their boldest move yet. 6 skiffs broke from the main group, charging directly toward the John Lenthal's stern, engines screaming, wake frothing behind them. Crew members braced themselves. The LOAD swung back, fire hoses angled down, and one of the ship's security teams raised non-lethal warning munitions. The first skiff crossed into the ship's immediate danger zone. The sound cannon hit them full force. At the same time, a concentrated blast of seawater from the fire main slammed into the boat, nearly flipping it. The pirates staggered, clutching weapons, but they were too close to quit. On the Bainbridge, the forward deck guns swiveled toward the swarm. The pirates were seconds from being in range, and that's when something unexpected happened, something that changed the fight entirely. One of the pirate skiffs, just meters from the John Lenthal's stern, suddenly erupted in a spray of white water, not from the supply ship's hoses, but from a near miss that sent a geyser towering into the air. The sound followed a fraction of a second later, deep, thunderous, and unmistakable naval gunfire. The Bainbridge had opened up. Her 5-inch forward deck gun spat another round, this one landing closer, the concussion throwing the skiff's crew into chaos. 2 of them tumbled overboard, clinging desperately to the side as their boat veered wildly off course. The remaining pirate craft hesitated, but only for a moment. The ringleader's boat, a larger skiff with a mounted DSHK heavy machine gun, pressed on. The gunner opened fire in long, ragged bursts, tracer rounds ricocheting off the John Lenthal's stern plating. Inside the supply ship's bridge, the captain's voice was clipped and calm. Maintain course. Speed 18 knots. Bainbridge has the lead. Overhead, the sudden roar of jet engines split the air. To F/A-18 Super Hornets, called in from a carrier group further offshore, streaked low over the pirate formation. The shockwave alone was enough to rattle the skiffs. The sound was deafening. From the air, the Hornet pilots fed targeting coordinates to the Bainbridge. The destroyer's secondary weapons, a pair of Mk-38 chain guns, came alive, stitching precise bursts into the water ahead of the charging boats. The pirate formation began to fracture. Some skiffs peeled away, throttles wide open in retreat, but not all of them. A cluster of 7 boats still circled, keeping just beyond the John Lenthal's defensive reach, shadowing her wake. They weren't fleeing, they were waiting. In the combat information center aboard the Bainbridge, the tactical officer spotted it. One of the trailing skiffs was different. Larger hull, enclosed compartments, heavy tarps covering something along the deck. He didn't like it. Possible mothership, he called out. That's your control vessel. The captain didn't hesitate. Target the mothership, disable. The forward gun trained in, adjusting a fraction to account for the swell. The range closed 1,400 yards. Then, without warning, the so-called mothership made its move. It surged forward, pulling away from the others, directly toward the Bainbridge. No more feints, no more circling. Whatever was under those tarps was about to be revealed. The tarps blew back in the wind, revealing long cylindrical tubes lashed to the deck, improvised rocket launchers, crudely mounted, but pointed dead ahead. The Bainbridge's fire control radar locked on instantly, the ship's computers calculating firing solutions in fractions of a second. But the mothership fired first. A single rocket whooshed off the deck, trailing a dirty plume of smoke across the waves. It wasn't guided, but at this range, it didn't have to be. The rocket splashed into the sea just off the destroyer's port bow, throwing a tall column of water skyward. The message was clear. The pirates weren't just here to board, they were ready to cripple. On the Bainbridge, the order came through with chilling clarity. Engage. Full authorization. The forward 5-inch gun thundered, the first round punching clean through the mothership's hull. A second shot struck aft, right at the engine mount. The blast blew the vessel sideways, debris scattering across the water. Pirates scrambled for life jackets, some leaping overboard into the churning wake. The smaller skiffs faltered without their command boat. 3 immediately turned tail, throttles screaming, as they headed for the horizon. But 4 of them didn't retreat. Instead, they surged toward the John Lenthal, accelerating in a desperate, last-ditch attempt to close the distance. The supply ship's LRAD screamed again, beams of deafening sound locking onto the nearest attackers. Fire hoses hammered the decks of the skiffs, but they pressed on, now within 100 yards. From overhead, one of the Super Hornets banked sharply, breaking formation with its wingman. It dropped low, so low the spray from the ocean kissed its fuselage and passed directly over the pirates at transonic speed. The shockwave slammed into the boats like an invisible hammer. 2 of the skiffs spun out, their crews clinging to the rails as engines coughed and died. The last 2 kept going. They were so close now that the crew of the John Lenthal could see the whites of their eyes. And then, without warning, one of the pirate boats veered away sharply, almost as if trying to escape. The other kept charging, but something was off. It wasn't aiming for the ship's sides. It was coming for the stern, right where the ship's replenishment cranes and fuel lines were stored. The pirate skiff's bow slammed against the waves, spray flying high as its engine roared at full throttle. On the John Lenthal's bridge, the captain's eyes locked on it. "Brace stern stations," he barked. Crew members scrambled, securing gear, swinging water cannons to full output. The LRAD operator kept the beam fixed on the approaching boat, but the pirates inside were crouched low, hands gripping the sides, seemingly unfazed by the deafening blast. Through binoculars, one of the security team spotted it, a dark, box-shaped device near the bow of the skiff. Wires trailed from it into the hull. It wasn't boarding gear. It was an improvised explosive. Possible V-beat, stern approach. The call rang out. The Bainbridge's port-side Mk-38 chain gun immediately pivoted, its barrel dropping to track the charging skiff. The gunner waited for the exact alignment, then unleashed a short, controlled burst. The first round stitched across the water, kicking up white plumes. The second burst found its mark tearing through the skiff's bow. The explosion came an instant later, violent and blinding. A boiling fireball tore the boat apart, sending fragments spinning across the sea. The concussion slapped against the John Lentful stern, rattling deck plates and setting off a chorus of alarms. But the ship was intact. In the sudden chaos, the last remaining pirate boats scattered. Some vanished into the haze. Others simply cut their engines, drifting in surrender as armed ribs from the Bainbridge roared toward them. From overhead, the Hornets wheeled back into high cover, their contrails tracing lazy arcs above the scene. The radio chatter shifted from the tense clipped tones of combat to the steady, deliberate calls of a mop-up operation. But on the Bainbridge's bridge, the captain wasn't ready to call it over. His eyes were fixed on a faint return on radar, something larger, further out, holding position well beyond visual range. It wasn't a merchant ship, and it wasn't moving away. The radar contact lingered like a shadow at the edge of the Bainbridge's screen, bigger than a skiff, smaller than a cargo ship, and keeping an exact distance as if it was watching. Range, the captain asked. 8 nautical miles. Stationary, the radar operator replied. Looks deliberate. The captain didn't like deliberate. Eyes on it. Get me a drone in the air. Aboard the destroyer's aft flight deck, the deck crew scrambled. Within minutes, a small, fixed-wing reconnaissance drone was catapulted into the sky, climbing above the humid haze. Its camera feed streamed directly to the Combat Information Center. At first, just open water, then there it was. A large, weathered fishing vessel, hull streaked with rust, nets hung from its sides, but they looked clean and used. And on the upper deck, a cluster of men stood watching the drone, not working. Several of them had binoculars. One had what looked suspiciously like a long rifle. They're tracking us, the intelligence officer said flatly. The John Lentful was still recovering from the near miss at the stern, her deck teams checking for damage, but the supply ship's captain was patched into the feed. He said what everyone was thinking. That's your real mothership. The Bainbridge adjusted course, closing the distance. The supposed fishing vessel didn't run. Instead, it powered forward directly toward the coordinates where the skiffs had first appeared. Almost as if it was retrieving something, the drone's camera zoomed in again, catching a flash of movement on the deck. Not just men this time, crates, big ones, being dragged toward the stern by the crew. They weren't preparing to fish. Captain, the tactical officer said, eyes locked on the screen. Those are weapons crates. I can see the stencils. Looks like surplus PKMs and RPGs. Before the captain could respond, the fishing vessel's engine note deepened, and the bow swung toward the east toward the Somali coast. Sir, they're bugging out. The Bainbridge had the range, the firepower, and the air cover to stop them, but the captain hesitated for just a moment because on the far horizon, behind the fishing boat, the drone picked up something else. A larger wake, long, sleek, fast, and whatever it was escorting the so-called fishing vessel home. The drone camera auto-focused, fighting heat shimmer off the water, until the shape behind the fishing vessel came into crisp view. It wasn't another Rush Street trawler. It was a Greyhold warship. Not big enough to be a destroyer, more like a fast attack craft, low to the water, with angular lines that screamed military design. On its bow sat a compact turret that looked like a 30mm autocannon, and its radar mast bristled with new-looking electronics. The Bainbridge's intelligence officer was already flipping through recognition profiles. A moment later, he looked up. Sir, that's not Somali. It's Iranian. Models consistent with the Pekin class. A quiet chill settled over the Combat Information Center. A local pirate mothership was one thing, a foreign naval asset, openly running escort for it, was another entirely. The captain straightened, helm, maintain intercept course. Let's see if they want to play shadow games in open water. The Bainbridge surged forward, her bow cutting through the swell. Overhead, one of the Super Hornets dipped low, banking toward the pair of ships for a closer pass. The Iranian fast attack craft's response was immediate. Its deck crew scrambled to battle stations, the autocannon turret pivoting upward to track the jet as it roared overhead. The fishing vessel, meanwhile, pushed to full speed, tucking itself close to the warship's port side like a calf under its mother. "They're not hiding anymore," the XO muttered. The Bainbridge's radar lit with a new tone targeting radar. Somebody out there had just locked onto them. The captain's voice was calm, but edged with steel. "Sound general quarters. All hands to battle stations." Klaxons wailed through the ship as sailors sprinted to their posts. The forward gun crews loaded high explosive shells. Missile hatches creaked open on the destroyer's deck, sunlight glinting off the sleek, deadly shapes inside. The Iranian ship slowed, letting the fishing vessel pull ahead, almost as if daring the Bainbridge to come closer. On the John Luntful, the crew watched the standoff unfold from miles back, the supply ship under the protective arc of the destroyer's guns. Over secure comms, the captain of the Bainbridge issued a final warning in clipped, formal language. The Iranian warship didn't respond. Instead, it shifted course slightly, just enough to reveal what was coming up over the horizon behind it. Another wake, bigger this time, and closing fast. The horizon shimmered, and then the shape emerged broad, flat, and bristling with antennas. It wasn't a merchant ship, it was a frigate. The Bainbridge's intelligence officer squinted at the drone feed, then exhaled slowly. Confirmed Iris Yamarom class, Iranian Navy. The air inside the Combat Information Center seemed to tighten. A frigate wasn't a skiff you could scatter with warning shots. It was a fully armed warship with anti-ship missiles, naval guns, and the speed to run down anything in the area. And now, it was closing the gap fast, sliding into a position that would box the Bainbridge between itself and the Pekin-class craft. The radio crackled to life an open channel. A heavily accented voice spoke in precise English. "American warship, you were operating in the vicinity of Iranian maritime patrol. Adjust course immediately." The Bainbridge's captain didn't flinch. "Unidentified Iranian vessel, you were escorting a pirate support ship. Adjust your course or prepare to be boarded." There was no reply. Instead, the Pekin class darted forward, its hull throwing a high spray as it moved to shield the fishing vessel completely. The Yamaron continued its approach, closing to missile range. On the horizon in the opposite direction, two more fast-moving contacts appeared on radar coming from the US side this time. The captain recognized their signatures instantly: Cyclone-class patrol ships, USS Hurricane and USS Monsoon, racing in at top speed to reinforce. Overhead, the pair of Super Hornets circled wider, maintaining position, but clearly ready to dive at a moment's notice. The sea between the two forces had gone deathly quiet, just the hum of engines and the crash of waves. Every ship was in position, weapons hot, waiting for the smallest move to ignite a confrontation that could spiral out of control. Then the fishing vessel did something no one expected. It stopped. Engines cut, net dragging in the water. It sat dead in the center of the tension line. A small motor launch was lowered into the sea from its side, heading not toward the Iranian warships, but toward the Bainbridge. And in that launch, hunched low under a tarp, was someone holding a white flag. The tarp flapped in the sea wind, revealing a gaunt, sunburned man, hands bound in front of him, eyes darting between the looming silhouettes of the warships. The Bainbridge's bridge went silent as the captain absorbed the scene. A white flag, yes, but also a prisoner. "Get me high zoom on that boat," he ordered. The drone feed tightened in, the image sharpening until the man's features were clear. He was wearing a torn khaki uniform, faded, but still recognizable to anyone who had worked near the Horn of Africa merchant crew uniform. The kind worn by supply convoys hijacked in pirate territory. The tactical officer spoke first. "Sir, I think that's a hostage." The captain frowned. "From where?" The answer came seconds later from Intel. Their voice clipped. "Cross-check complete. He's the chief engineer from the MV Armar. Hijacked 3 months ago. Somali pirate crew. No confirmed rescue." The small launch kept coming, bobbing in the swells, its tiny outboard motor puttering under the shadow of two giants, the Bainbridge on one side, the Iranian frigate on the other. But it wasn't just a hostage they noticed. The drone caught something else under the tar plastic barrels, sealed tight, lashed down with fraying ropes. "Could be fuel," the XO guessed. The intel officer shook his head. "Too small for that." And the markings, those of fertilizer drums, silence spread through the CIC. Everyone understood what that meant. Fertilizer in this part of the world wasn't just for farming, it was a common component in homemade explosives. The captain's jaw set. "Helm, bring us alongside, but keep distance." Chain guns on that launch, safety off. On the horizon, the Amaron frigate slowed its advance. The Pagan class, too, held position, letting the fishing vessel drift. It was as if they were watching to see how the Americans would react. The launch was now within hailing distance. A voice, cracked and desperate, shouted in broken English, "They leave me, please take. Boat is a dangerous." Before the captain could issue an order, one of the barrels shifted in the swell, its lid jostling loose, a dark, oily liquid sloshed inside. It wasn't fertilizer after all, it was fuel, and judging by the wires taped along the inside of the launch's hull, it wasn't just carrying it, it was rigged to blow. The realization hit the bridge like a shockwave. VB'd. "That's a floating bomb." The tactical officer barked. The captain didn't hesitate. "Gunner, neutralize that craft now." The Bainbridge's port-side Mk-38 chain gun roared to life, spitting high-caliber rounds in a tight, surgical burst. The first shot stitched across the bow of the launch, but the operator adjusted instantly, walking the fire into the barrels. The impact was instantaneous. One of the barrels ruptured, spewing flaming liquid as tracer rounds ignited the vapors. The explosion wasn't as massive as it could have been, but it was still enough to rip the little boat apart in a rolling fireball. A plume of black smoke curled into the sky, the concussion slapping against the destroyer's hull. The man under the tarp, whether hostage or unwitting decoy, was gone in an instant. The Iranian Pagan-class ships urged forward the moment the fireball dissipated, cutting between the fishing vessel and the Bainbridge, its autocannon swinging toward the American warship of a clear act of aggression. Overhead, both Super Hornets broke from their lazy circles, diving low in a show of force. The Amaron frigate altered course just slightly, bringing its missile batteries to bear without a single word over the radio. The Iranian ships were no longer posturing, they were preparing to fight. "To cyclones are 3 minutes out," the XO reported, his voice tight. The captain scanned the tactical display. The John Lenthal was safely tucked well behind the destroyer now, but she was still within missile range. This turned hot. The radio crackled again, this time on a secure channel, US Naval Command out of Bahrain. The message was short, but its weight was unmistakable. "Hold position. Reinforcements inbound. Do not fire unless fired upon." On the radar, a new contact appeared far to the northwest, larger than anything else in the area. Too big to be another destroyer. Its speed suggested something more serious. And as the data resolved, the identification tag flashed across the screen. USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. The air around the bridge seemed to change. The game on the water had just shifted, but the Iranians hadn't seen it yet. The Eisenhower was still beyond the visible horizon, but her presence was already being felt in the air. From the Bainbridge's bridge wing, Lookout spotted the first sign of faint glimmer in the high blue sky. Within moments, it became unmistakable. Contrails, straight and deliberate, carving toward the engagement zone. Air package inbound from Ike, the air officer confirmed, eyes locked on the radar return. Hornets, Growlers, and, looks like a Hawkeye. The Iranian ships hadn't reacted yet, but they would. The Yamaron still held her missile batteries at the ready. And the Paken-class prowled, just off the Bainbridge S-bow like a wolf daring the shepherd to make a move. On the John Lenthal, sailors watched the standoff unfold in tense silence. Even from their distance, they could see the sharp, aggressive angles of the Iranian craft and the American destroyer holding its ground, guns trained, not giving an inch. Then the roar came, to F.A.-180 Super Hornets streaked overhead at barely a few hundred feet, their engines hammering the sea into whitecaps. They split in perfect formation, one passing low over the Yamaron, the other buzzing the Paken. It wasn't just a flyby, it was a message. The Iranian crews flinched, but held their positions. The Jamron's captain finally came over the radio, his voice stiff, but tinged with something new hesitation. "American warship, you are in contested waters. Withdraw immediately." The Bainbridge's captain keyed his mic, his reply calm, but unyielding. "Negative. We will not allow the transit of armed pirate support vessels. You will break escort and surrender the fishing vessel for inspection." Silence. Then movement, not from the Iranians, but from the fishing vessel itself. Her engines fired up suddenly, and she began turning not toward the Somali coast, but back toward the Bainbridge. The drone zoomed in, catching chaos on her deck. Men were shouting, some armed, some throwing crates overboard. One of them was waving frantically at the American ship. The Iranians reacted instantly. The Paken-class accelerated to cut her off, while the Yamaron began to angle away, almost as if trying to slip out of the fight before the carrier group arrived. But the real surprise came when one of the Super Hornets banked sharply, its targeting pod locked not on the Iranian ships, but on something in the water, just beyond the fishing vessel, a long, dark shape, rising. At first, it was just a shadow beneath the surface, barely visible in the drone feed. Then the water bulged and foamed, and the long, sleek form broke through. It wasn't another skiff. It was a submarine, low, angular sail. Black hull, no flag markings. The CIC went dead silent as the sonar team confirmed it diesel-electric, small displacement, consistent with the Iranian Ghadir class. But this one wasn't surfacing for fresh air. It was surfacing in the middle of an active standoff. "Sir, she's right in our lap," the sonar chief said, voice low. 50 yards off the fishing vessel's port side. The submarine's forward deck hatch cracked open, and the man emerged, waving a red flag, the universal signal for restricted maneuvering. But mounted on the casing behind him was something that didn't belong there, a cylindrical crate, lashed with steel cable. The Bainbridge's intel officer, forward at the feed, his face hardening. "That's not standard gear. Could be mines." Or, he didn't finish. The Iranian Paken-class immediately altered course, moving to shield the submarine from the Americans' line of sight. The Yamaron, instead of closing the gap, began sliding away even faster, almost as if it wanted no part of whatever was about to happen. "Sir," the XO said, "the sub's in shallow water for this depth. If they detonate anything here—" "I know," the captain cut in. On the fishing vessel's deck, the chaos had reached a fever pitch. Several of the armed men were now aiming their rifles not at the Americans, but at the submarine crew. One fired, and the crack echoed across the waves. The man with the red flag crumpled, falling against the casing. The crate shifted dangerously, one of its cables snapping loose. From the air, one of the Super Hornets broke from its holding pattern, diving hard, targeting pod locked on the submarine's position. That was when the Bainbridge's sonar lit up with a chilling new contact, fast-moving, underwater, closing from the south. It wasn't another Iranian sub, and it wasn't alone. The sonar screen painted it in real-time, multiple returns, low acoustic signatures, approaching in a staggered spread. 3 contacts confirmed, the sonar chief said, his voice tight. "They're moving like torpedo interceptors. US pattern." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Friendlies. Almost certainly. Fast attack subs. Closest is 30 seconds from intercept range. On the surface, no one could see them, but their presence was already influencing the water above, small, rhythmic swells rippling outward from unseen movement below." The Iranian Pekin class seemed to realize what was happening. She throttled down sharply, staying as close as possible to the Ghadir-class submarine, using her own hull as a shield. The Yamaron frigate, now farther off, began transmitting something in encrypted bursts, rapid and repeated. "Sir," the intel officer said, "they're calling for extraction." Extraction meant one thing: someone or something aboard that fishing vessel was more valuable than the ship itself. The crate on the Ghadir-class's deck slid again, one corner dipping toward the water. Another cable popped free with a metallic snap. From the drone feed, the Americans got their first clear look at the markings stenciled in black, Farsi lettering, along with the English words, "Deep Water Package 7. No one in the Bainbridge's CIC liked the sound of that. The fishing vessel, still fighting the Pekin's attempts to cut her off, made a sudden hard turn toward the Americans. A voice came over emergency channel, frantic, thick accent, barely understandable through the static. "They take it. They take to Yemen. Stop them." In that instant, the first of the unknown fast attack subs broke the surface for just a heartbeat, sleek, black, water streaming down her sail, then vanished again. The Ghadir class jolted sideways in the water, a deep thump echoing through the sea. The crate lurched, teetering on the edge of the casing. Above, the two Super Hornets dove in unison, their presence now unmistakably aggressive. The Bainbridge's captain gripped the railing on the bridge wing, eyes locked on the scene unfolding below. Then, as if the tension wasn't enough, the radar operator's voice cut through the noise. "New air contact low. Fast. Inbound from the east. Multiple bogies." The screen lit with half a dozen fresh returns. Whatever was coming, it wasn't American. The radar feed resolved the new contacts in seconds. 6 low-flying fast movers, coming in just above the wave tops to stay under long-range detection. Their silhouettes, sharp and angular, matched intel photos immediately. Iranian Kar 313 strike fighters. The Bainbridge's captain knew exactly what that meant. This was no longer a standoff, it was the prelude to a shooting war. "Air package from Eisenhower is 2 minutes out," the air officer reported. "We'll have full cover." On the water, everything moved at once. The Ghadir-class submarine suddenly flooded its tanks and began to dive, the mysterious crate still lashed to its deck. It didn't make it far. A geyser of water erupted beside her hull as one of the unidentified fast attack subs loosed a non-lethal intercept charge, enough force to knock her sideways, sending the crate tumbling into the sea. The moment it hit the water, the fishing vessel's crew scrambled to the rail, shouting and pointing. The Pekin class tried to reverse to recover it, but a Cyclone-class U.S. patrol ship USS Hurricane slid into position, its bow wave cutting them off. Overhead, the first of the Kar 313s appeared, black against the sun. Before they could descend on the American ships, two A-180 Super Hornets from the Eisenhower streaked him from the west, locking missiles in the same instant. The Iranian jets broke formation, scattering eastward without firing a shot. The Yamaron frigate, seeing the carrier's full air wing inbound, cut power to her missile systems and turned hard to the south, retreating at speed. The Pekin class followed suit, throttling away from the Bainbridge. Within minutes, the only vessels left near the Americans were the John Lempfel, the Bainbridge, to Cyclone patrol ships, and the battered fishing vessel. A rib from the Bainbridge recovered the floating crate. Inside, the Navy's EAD team found what intel would later confirm, not explosives, but specialized sonar arrays and encryption modules, gear capable of mapping U.S. submarine movements in the region. The fishing vessel's crew, once treated and debriefed, told the rest of the story. Somali pirates had hijacked them, then been paid by an Iranian cutout to move the package into the Gulf, with the promise of protection from the Iranian Navy. By the time the sun set, the Eisenhower was anchored in a protective position, her air wing flying constant cap. The Bainbridge's crew stood down from battle stations, exhaustion settling in only after the adrenaline bled away. In the captain's cabin, a single report was typed for Naval Command. It ended with a line that summed up the day better than anything else. "We didn't just stop a pirate attack, we intercepted a covert transfer that could have changed the balance of power in these waters." The sea was calm again, but everyone aboard knew it wouldn't stay that way for long.